Internal political conflict has degraded a once prosperous and welcoming country into a humanitarian crisis.
Venezuela has been one of the most friendly countries when it comes to receiving migrants and refugees in South America's history. After the World War II, Venezuela used to receive migrants from Spain, Germany, Italy, Portugal, but also from neighboring countries like Colombia, Bolivia, Ecuador.
After World War II, the international community came together and said, we need to do something about refugees. We need to have a way of responding when refugee crises happen.
Venezuela answered this call. Between 1941 and 1961, the foreign-born population in Venezuela rose from approximately 50,000 to over 520,000. These people chose to relocate to Venezuela because of its prosperity and welcoming stance on immigrants and refugees.
My grandparents left the Soviet Union in the 1920s. They went to Cuba and they had to flee again with my father, who was a teenager, and they arrived to Venezuela. People went to Venezuela because they saw a country that with opportunities.
In South and Central America, the 1970s saw the rise of conflict leading to civil wars or gang violence. During this decade, the foreign-born population in Venezuela once again skyrocketed. The number of immigrants and refugees rose from over 560,000 people to over 1 million by 1981. Once again, Venezuela had opened its doors and welcomed those in need of sanctuary and opportunity to its shores. In 1984, Venezuela joined 9 other Latin American countries in signing the Cartagena Declaration.
The Cartagena Declaration was a way of making sure that those people were also considered to be refugees and were thus part of the international architecture.
This expanded the qualifications for refugee status. In the decades following the Cartagena Declaration, Colombians soon faced a bloody and brutal battle between the government and FARC, a guerrilla rebel group. By 2003, many Colombians had fled to Venezuela because of this crisis. Venezuela continued to be a friend to those in need.
You ask them about Venezuela and they tell you, I am more Venezuelan than a Spaniard, I'm more Venezuelan than Italian, because this country, when I didn't have anything, when I had to flee my country, opened its door.
But the people of a country that once served as a welcoming immigration hub soon faced problems in their own home. Once one of the strongest democracies in the world, Venezuela is now facing catastrophe under a dictatorial regime. Venezuelans have become victims of hyperinflation, poverty, violence, and government inaction.
In the last 15 years, the dismantling of institutions and the violations of human rights has made many of them flee the country.
If a greater international response is not enacted, over 5.3 million Venezuelans will have fled by the end of 2019.
It was one of the toughest things to see. When you grow up in a country that it was very common to have immigrants, and there was no xenophobia, and we embraced all of them, and now seeing a lot of Venezuelans fleeing. Those immigrants that arrived to Venezuela when they were teenagers, like my father now, they are old and they're going back to their countries. And that's one of the most perverse and cruel things that this regime has done in Venezuela.
How can Venezuelans return home and uphold their history as a place of refuge? Instead of acting as a haven for others, they are desperately in need of one.